In this video, we follow how surveillance powers, intelligence failures, media narratives, and entrenched institutions can all collide in the same political story.
And instead of doing the job for the American people, they come out and instead come up with government boondoggles that pay themselves billions and billions of dollars, or their friends billions and billions of dollars, which is our dollars. And they want to make sure that that keeps going over and over and over again. I'll give you a perfect example. Who cares if you've ever followed Russiagate or any of this other stuff about the deep state? Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, and Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general then of the DOJ, were tasked with helping us at Congress, where I ran the Russiagate investigation, to expose Russiagate. We went to them and said, look, you guys didn't do this. Help us expose it. And they both doubled down. You know what they did? They launched an investigation against me, the senior congressional investigator for Russiagate on the House Intelligence Committee, and 6 other staffers. They used grand jury subpoenas to get my personal information, my banking information, my emails, my cell phone information.
Patel's claim here is that the system turns inward, that the same agencies meant to investigate wrongdoing can be used against the people trying to expose it. In this clip, Chris Wray is questioned about Section 702 and whether an authority meant for foreigners is also being used to search Americans' communications. His answer is not that it never happens, but that the program is still designed for foreign intelligence.
Section 702 authorizes warrantless surveillance. It's supposed to be targeted toward foreigners abroad, but the surveillance sweeps in a large amount of Americans' communications, and the FBI routinely runs searches of Section 702 data looking for phone calls, emails, text messages of Americans, so-called backdoor searches. Depending on the year, FBI has conducted anywhere from 3.4 million in 2021 to 200,000 in 2022. Given this fact, do you honestly think it's fair to continue describing Section 702 as an authority targeted only at foreigners abroad?
I do.
It looks like a framework that enables the FBI to spy on countless Americans. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, I can't speak to what it looks like to certain people. I can tell you that it is an authority focused on foreigners overseas in the context of national security investigations.
Well, if you're conducting hundreds of thousands or even just hundreds of warrantless searches of Section 702 data for Americans' communications, it's clearly a domestic surveillance tool.
What stands out in that exchange is that the disagreement is not really over whether Americans' data gets caught up in the system. The disagreement is over whether that makes Section 702 a foreign intelligence tool or a domestic surveillance one in practice. Kash Patel later found that the FBI used it against him in exactly that way.
Everything else. I didn't find out till 5 years later when Google called me and said, hey, our 5-year notification has lapsed. We can now tell you the DOJ surveilled you. And we had to turn over documents. So that became that we exploded that into a federal lawsuit that's still ongoing in the DOJ and FBI. But those two guys.
Hold on. What? So Google informed you that you're being surveilled 5 years after the investigation started.
Right.
What more did they tell you?
They're not allowed to say anything, but that you can be informed now since it's 5 years later. So as a former national security prosecutor, I know you don't just go to Google. You go to every provider. You go to all the telecoms. You go to the bank. You go to everybody. If you're going to run an investigation, that's what you do. But these two guys who were running the FBI and DOJ sat in a room with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and lied to our faces. They threatened to investigate us, which was bad enough, right? They actually did it. And then these two guys would get exposed, for Rod Rosenstein specifically, for signing a FISA that was totally bogus.
After Special Counsel John Durham released his report, FBI Director Christopher Wray was questioned in Congress about the origins of Crossfire Hurricane, the handling of exculpatory evidence, whether key witnesses were interviewed, and whether the FBI abused its FISA authority. Here's part of that exchange.
Did the FBI have an adequate basis on which to launch Crossfire Hurricane?
My understanding is that Mr. Durham found that it did not have a proper basis to elevate it to a full investigation, but that he thought it was an assessment or a preliminary inquiry was appropriate.
Did the FBI fail to examine all available exculpatory evidence?
I think, well, do you say to examine it? Certainly, I think there were failures, significant failures, with respect to exculpatory information.
Did the FBI interview all key witnesses in Crossfire Hurricane?
I think Mr. Durham, found that they did not.
Did the FBI abuse its authority under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act?
Well, certainly there were violations that were totally unacceptable, and in my view, cannot be allowed to happen again.
In that testimony, Wray admitted that his understanding was that Durham found there was not a proper basis to elevate Crossfire Hurricane to a full investigation, acknowledged significant failures involving exculpatory information, and said the FISA violations were totally unacceptable and could not be allowed to happen again.
And we've caught Chris Wray lying time and time again as the director of the FBI. Put these guys over here for a second. Gina Haspel, who was the director of the CIA, was London station chief in England when Russiagate kicked off. Under the rule of law in America, if you want the Federal Bureau of Investigation to launch an investigation overseas, you have to get permission from the head intel rep. In England, it's the the station chief. So she allowed Russiagate to occur on British soil, where there was a barroom operation to try to record some nub into spilling the beans on Donald Trump. And they would use that to launch the whole Russiagate offensive. Gina Haspel would later become Trump's CIA director.
If there is one thing this story makes clear, it is that once surveillance powers exist, privacy can disappear faster than most people realize. Proton VPN is a simple way to take back more control of your digital life. It helps keep your browsing more private, gives you access to geo-blocked content while traveling, supports gaming and secure sharing, and adds protection when you're connected to public Wi-Fi. Right now, you can get 70% off with a 30-day money-back guarantee.
And then when these guys got out of the administration, do you know where Gina Haspel and Rod Rosenstein work today?
Where?
At Christopher Wray's old law firm as senior named partners, making 7 and 8 figures.
How is this going to get broken up? It seems so deep.
Yeah.
I mean, you just mentioned they're embedded in politics. They're embedded in mainstream media. They're embedded in intelligence agencies. They are former top leadership of the military that's now embedded within the military-industrial complex companies.
This kind of move is not unusual in Washington. Firms like King & Spalding recruit former officials because their value is not only legal skill, it is access, judgment, and knowledge of how power works from the inside. Reuters has described the firm as home to several former top U.S. officials, and Haspel joined what it called a crowded field of agency alumni there. The compensation helps explain why this pattern keeps repeating. King & Spalding reported roughly $5.9 million in profits per equity partner in 2024, and Wray himself disclosed earning $9.2 million there before taking over the FBI. Not every former official is paid at that level, and advisory compensation is often private, but the ceiling is clearly extremely high.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's how many people are involved in this?
Thousands.
In the deep state.
Thousands.
How would you even begin to dismantle it?
Well, I think the first Trump administration was the beachhead, right? People were just like, you guys are full of it. And we continued to put out the truth. And years later, people are catching up to a lot of that truth, saying, wait a second, you guys weren't lying back then. People being the American public. That's the weapon we need. And you guys weren't lying about impeachment. They literally made up a piece of a phone call to launch a presidential impeachment and then put me in the middle of it by making up a meeting that never occurred. But it sounded dirty at the time. And then when we finally released the transcript, everybody was like, oh yeah, there was no quid pro quo. Nothing illegal happened here. But the narrative had been out there.
The White House released its memorandum of the July 25, 2019 call with Volodymyr Zelensky on September 25, 2019. The memo did not contain an explicit quid pro quo statement, but that did not end the story. House investigators argued the call was only one piece of a larger pressure campaign tied to military aid and a White House meeting, and the House later impeached Trump on abuse of power and obstruction of Congress before the Senate acquitted him.
Now you have President Trump as a president who was impeached for the first time in however many years. And so they get their narratives, right? They don't necessarily care about the conclusory portion of their mission. They use the mainstream media to say Trump's a Russian asset. He's been impeached. Kash Patel is under DOJ surveillance for whatever investigation when he was never done. I've had more mainstream media hits on me than I can count. But they want the title narrative to carry the day. Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation. They don't care about the actual truth. And so once you start stacking these together and you show the American public you were lied to, you based your vote at the polls on information that the government purposely withheld from you so that you would vote a particular way.
And this is part of what modern politics has become. The real objective is often not to prove the case all the way through, but to land the headline first. If the accusation is dramatic enough, if the label is damaging enough, and if the media repeats it loudly enough, then for millions of people the impression is already set long before the facts are fully tested. By the time the details come out, the political damage is usually already done.
Once you show enough Americans that, then I think you have the movement that you need behind the leadership that we have in Donald Trump, is my position, to take a wrecking ball to the deep state.
How so?
You go to DC and you remove all these positions, right? And you start enacting measures, not of retribution, but of legal consequence. Y'all acted one way. For instance, the people that signed the 51 Intel letter, right? Permanently suspend their security clearances forever. Every one of those guys lied. Every one of those guys got caught lying. You're talking about 2 former CIA directors, a former NSA director, and a former Secretary of Defense. All intentionally, to this day, continue to lie and won't take back their letter.
The 51 Intel letter was a public statement released in October 2020, just days after the New York Post published its Hunter Biden laptop story. It was signed by 51 former intelligence officials, including former DNI James Clapper, former CIA directors John Brennan, Michael Hayden, and Leon Panetta, along with dozens of other former senior national security officials. The letter itself was slightly narrower than the shorthand that followed. It said the story had the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation, but also admitted the signers did not know whether the emails were genuine and did not have evidence of Russian involvement. Publicly, the point was to raise suspicion about the story's origins. Later testimony from former acting CIA Director Michael Morell, cited in a House report, said the statement was also intended to give Joe Biden a talking point for the final debate. The problem is that the core suspicion behind the letter did not hold up. Later reporting authenticated thousands of emails from the data, and no public evidence ever emerged showing the laptop itself was a Russian disinformation operation. At the same time, forensic analysts also found chain of custody problems with copies of the data, which meant not every file could be cleanly verified. So the most precise way to say it is this: the letter helped cast the story as likely foreign disinformation at the exact political moment that mattered most, and later reporting undercut that suspicion rather than confirming it.
Okay, you can stop making money from your security clearance. There's a start. The same thing we're talking about the voting, it's the same thing here. You got to cleanse the scrolls. Government service is a service. We're not making you do it. And if you break the rules and regulations, you're out. So that's a big part of it, right? Then you bring in the new bench, the new team. Then you're going to have to keep fighting the media. And I think we're slowly, over the years, have started to win that fight. Because the more and more, this is one thing I learned when I started Russiagate, my name was outed for the first time, that the media is attacking you, the more you're over the target.
Who is at the head of it?
I don't think there's one person or one group.
The deep state is not usually described as some secret council meeting in a dark room. It is the idea that unelected officials, entrenched institutions, and powerful outside interests can keep shaping outcomes long after elections are over. The point is not that democracy disappears. It is that a permanent class can still steer a lot of what government actually does.
I think it's people who know they're going to benefit from each other if they sign up for the program, let's call it, right? And so, again, not a Republican or Democrat thing. In the glossary of this book, in alphabetical order, I think there's like 65 people I name by title and name, just to show people how expansive the deep state is. And so there is no like one chain of command they report to. Instead, what I believe they do is they bring in people that they can control. Oh, the Obamas still have heavy sway in that entire operation. And so do people that have been around for 10, 20, 30 years in Washington.
I mean, I think it's already out there for them. I mean, how corrupt it is.
Whether you agree with every claim or not, the larger question is hard to ignore. When the same agencies, media outlets, and power networks keep shaping the story, how much of politics is really about truth and how much of it is about control? If you found this breakdown valuable, drop a comment below with your thoughts and consider subscribing for more. If you want to further support the channel and get more out of it, check out our memberships. They get you loyalty badges, custom emojis, early access to new videos, and members-only polls. It's a great way to support classified context and help us keep making more of these videos.